What's up, nostalgia nerds? We're back and jumping right into some more Crash content. I'll probably be taking a short break from the Bandicoot after this review, because I have such a backlog of things I want to talk about. But that's not today. Today, we cap off the discussion of an amazing trilogy. The third mainline entry and the silver medal winner on my tier list is none other than Crash Bandicoot Warped. And I gotta let you know, this video may get a little personal. While it isn't my number one favorite Crash game, I think I have the deepest connection with this one when it comes to games in the original trilogy, so let's take a walk. One of my earliest memories of the game is playing a ton of it at my grandma's house before she passed away. And my last memory of the game at that age was my older sister and I fighting over who was going to put the disc in the tray and snapping it in half. That was the last physical copy I ever owned. While my siblings moved on to bigger and better life experiences, I put a majority of my time into building my collection back up, and I would say that I'm finally at a point where I've done it. In some way, shape, or form, I own about 90% of the games I did as a kid and a ton of new stuff as well. This rebuilding of my collection and regaining of part of my identity through hours of hard work and dedication draws the perfect parallel to this entry in the Crash Bandicoot series. How do you rebuild an amazing experience without retreading on the ground of what was? Well, you innovate. For me, innovation meant building the Nostalgia Nate channel, a small digital corner where I could reminisce, give my gaming opinions, and form new and exciting ones as the landscape changed, and share those thoughts with you guys. I mean, what better way to celebrate and look back on your collection than to talk about it in the form of publicly accessible media? And for Naughty Dog, that meant building a game that was jam-packed with content, secrets, and refreshing level ideas, and sharing them with us, the Crash Bandicoot fanbase, because again, what better way to celebrate this beautiful thing you created than to encapsulate it all in one final project? Well, today we're gonna explore that final project together. I'm Nostalgia Nate, and this is Replaying Crash Bandicoot Warped. 1997 passes to its holiday season, and Crash 2 is an even bigger hit than its predecessor. You guys know where this is going.
Three things: shift, speed, focus.
Why is that ambulance there?
No. Take it easy. Lift and jump. And turning and smile.
Piece of cake, Captain. Let's do this.
He's training for his biggest adventure yet. Oh yeah, he's ready.
We received Crash Bandicoot Warped, or Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped if you're in Europe, on November 3rd, 1998. Warped received high praise in every category, and is generally considered by many to be the best game in the series. The programmers created 3 new engines in the game to be used for the jet ski, airplane, and motorcycle levels respectively, with the original game engine being used for all the platforming stages. Jason Rubin said that if they were to abandon the original gameplay and art style, that they would in turn be ignoring a majority of the fanbase, and so the developers packed as much as they could into the game with those parameters in mind. Ultimately, this led to an array of diverse levels and engaging bosses who were equal parts colorful and memorable. This was a version of the IP that was firing on all cylinders, and damn does it show in the final product. As a heads up, I'm not going to be using any footage from the original game, and instead I'll be solely relying on footage from the N-Sane trilogy. This is because I feel that the N-Sane trilogy's take on Warp is a damn near one-to-one recreation with little to no differences between the two games, save for the fact that Coco is playable more than she was in the PS1 version. Okay, with that out of the way, let's hop into the story.
Free at last. Uka Uka is free? No, it cannot be. Evil, great evil has come.
I think this is the story that I'm most invested in out of the games in the trilogy. This is the first glimpse we get into the fatherly role Aku Aku has taken for Crash and Coco. We also find that Crash and Coco have an actual house in this game, and it's a detail that has stuck with me from childhood to now. This screenshot really takes me back. Feels like home. Anyway, jumping right into it, at the end of Crash 2, Cortex's space station was destroyed and landed on the island. This inadvertently releases Uka Uka, another mask who is the embodiment of evil and Aku Aku's brother. Uka Uka and Cortex team up along with time-obsessed scientist Dr. Nefarious Tropy to use a device called the Time Twister to travel through time to collect crystals to power up another machine and take over the world. Real run-of-the-mill stuff here from Cortex, to be honest. If I had half this man's work ethic and resilience, I would be knee-deep in content at this point. So it's up to Crash, Coco, and Aku Aku to collect the crystals before the villains and put a stop to Cortex's crazy schemes. In addition to collecting crystals, the gems also make their return, and although they aren't tied directly to the story, they're still a fun secondary objective, and collecting colored gems is a lot less obtuse this time around. I know I praised Crash 2 for the way it was clever about hiding its secrets, but I also know some people who prefer a little more of a hint as to what gems go where, and how to get them. If that's you, then it looks like this game is your stop. To round out the collectibles, we also have the relics, which upon collection open up 5 new bonus levels in the basement floor area. More on that later. I also want to give you the rundown of the villain lineup this time around because man did they know what they were doing when they made these guys. The villains actually interact with the player between levels in this game, and it really adds to the overall immersion. This is not the boss rush, so keep it in your pants, guys. The lineup of this game's bosses is as follows.
Crash! Coco! Stole the pretty crystals! Tiny, take them back in Gladiator Arena!
This is Tiny's best incarnation. There's so much added to his character here. He's a brute through and through who tries to intimidate us while we collect the crystals in the first warp room area. His boss fight also sees him fighting you in a Roman Colosseum and trying to feed you to lions, which is pretty ironic considering he himself is a big cat and an anthropomorphic one at that. We also cleaned his clock last game.
Right. Now you've gone and done it. Them crystals are mine.
My man with the thickness and the flamethrower. He's some sort of mix between a crocodile and a dingo, and I think he was my first exposure to an Australian accent. I think he's personally one of my favorite villains by merit of his design alone. Giving animals human qualities is one thing, but crossbreeding on top of that really makes Dingodile stand out. And his boss fight is one that has stuck with me through the years. I think one of the things that Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time did right is bringing this man back as a playable character.
You little vermin are way too stupid to understand what you're getting yourselves into. This time, you've done it!
The genius of this boss placement cannot be understated. Nefarious Tropy, or Entropy for short, is the new addition to our rogues gallery of scientists. He has every right to take the penultimate boss slot or even share the final boss slot with Cortex. He's the inventor of the Time Twister, and therefore there's really no telling how stable it was going to be after his defeat. The fact that he marks the halfway point of the game both leaves things unpredictable and exciting upon his defeat, with Cortex warning you of the consequences of your actions.
So, you want to go a few rounds? When this is over, we'll see who is obsolete.
N-Sane gets to take the second to last slot in terms of boss battles, and it's honestly a little surprising. Like I said in the last video, N-Sane is one of my favorite characters in Crash Bandicoot, but his boss fight in Cortex Strikes Back honestly felt a little bit lackluster. Here we're given a much more fun fight with a space battle where you play as Coco. This gives me vibes of something straight out of Star Fox, and frankly, I think N-Sane and Coco are perfect foils to one another. Both characters are considered to be great minds, one for good and the other for evil. They also play second fiddle or sidekick to someone on their teams. Such a solid fight, and it's so fun to see N-Sane return.
I'm sorry. This is the part where I'm supposed to be angry, full of rage, incensed beyond belief. Once again, you have outsmarted and outspun my best henchman. I should be rather upset, shouldn't I?
And in fact, we're furious, but it seems you have overlooked one small detail, you little orange delivery boy. Now that you have gathered all the crystals, all we have to do is take them from you!
Unsurprisingly, Neo Cortex is our final boss. To keep things interesting this time around, he's accompanied by Uka Uka. This immediately makes this the best Cortex fight out of the 3 we've seen. Like, yeah, he's still on his hoverboard shooting at you per usual, but this time you have the battle between the masks going on in the background, which makes the most use of your platforming skills. The chaos that is this boss fight is something I find myself coming back to time after time. The reason I wanted to go through this cast of bosses so early is because it feels like, for the first time in a Crash Bandicoot game, we have somewhat fleshed out villains. It's less random animals and more genuine bad guys sitting at the round table plotting Crash's doom. I love that. This rogues gallery of misfits with bold personalities and solid fights is just more proof that Crash has really hit his stride in this game. It really adds that extra spice to the story that we don't really get to see in the previous 2 entries. Outside of the bosses, we have of course 30-ish new levels to explore. I think these are best broken down by level type. First off is the bread and butter of the Crash series, the platforming levels. There are several different types of levels spread across each warp room, so I figured I'd organize them according to those archetypes instead of just going in level order. Starting off, we have our fairy tale / medieval theme, and I have to say that this is one of my favorites. I can't think of a better way to start off a Crash game. This is the perfect mix of history and fantasy embodied in one theme, and I think the mix of magic and renaissance really serves itself well to a Crash level. We're treated to this medieval flavor in 3 levels. Toad Village, which is my favorite starting level of the trilogy. It's sunny, bright, and colorful. It also introduces new players to the plethora of ways one can use Crash's base moveset. This transitions straight into G-Wiz, which both changes the time of day and is the logical next step difficulty-wise, as we're going to find out for most of these themes. Last is Doubleheader, and it once again changes the time of day and introduces us to these terrifying things. But yeah, I love me some medieval madness. Next up is what I like to call the Arabian Nights level theme. This is probably tied for my favorite level theme in the game. Hanging from rafters and platforming across flying carpets are really creative ways to design a platforming experience. These levels include Hang 'em High, High Time, and Flaming Passion. Watch out for those guys throwing literal Molotov cocktails out the windows. I think the transition from day to night across this set of levels really allowed the developers to play with fun color schemes and lighting for them. I specifically like the way the fire looks with the nighttime background. It might just be the graphic designer in me, but I'm a sucker for contrast. Thirdly, and also tied for my favorite level theme, is the Egyptian levels. Scouring tombs, avoiding traps, and seeing the ways that Naughty Dog interpreted the setting to fit with the game's characters is such a treat. I also love the tricky obstacles such as water traps and the pitch black of night. Plus, it's such a treat for the eyes to explore both indoor and outdoor sections of this theme. This theme covers the levels Tomb Time, Tomb Waiter, Sphinxinator, and Bug Light. Yeah, Bug Light. I didn't notice on first playthrough either, but there's definitely clear ties to the setting if you pay close attention. Last, and honestly my least favorite of these levels, are the futuristic ones. They're okay, but I think in general sci-fi has never been my favorite genre. I don't really care for aliens, flashing lights, hoverboards, and the like. The exception being Ratchet and Clank, and believe me, we'll get there soon enough. These levels are hallway platforming sections that in my opinion are a little bit uninspired. Yeah, there's secrets that give you the runaround and enemies that seem like they're making good use of the bazooka power-up, but honestly you can just spin these guys, and the rest all just kinda blends together. I mentioned in a previous video how much I admire Bob Raffy's jungle and wilderness artwork, and this just doesn't scratch that itch for me. On top of that, the futuristic levels appear so late in the game that the difficulty kinda feels samey, and I have trouble telling the difference between Future Frenzy and Gone Tomorrow. The N-Sane trilogy also threw in a bonus level called Future Tense, and while this one's a lot more difficult, I just don't enjoy the overall vibe. Following our platforming levels, we have the underwater levels. There's only 2 in this game, and I have to say something a little controversial here. I actually thoroughly enjoy the underwater levels in the game. I think they break up the pacing really nicely, and as a younger sibling, I was often handed the controller when these levels came to pass. The water controls are pretty tight, especially for a 5th generation console, and the N-Sane trilogy only serves to make the controls even better. These tubes also reminded me of the tubes at Chuck E. Cheese's as a kid, and damn does that bring back the good feels. They stuck to 2D for these sections, and I think that only served to make the level concept stronger, as navigating a 3D space underwater could be pretty tricky in that era, unless your name was Spyro the Dragon. As far as level lineup goes for these underwater levels, we have Under Pressure and Deep Trouble. Returning from Crash 1 and 2 is of course a level type that's a hybrid of platforming and running towards the screen. I think that Naughty Dog did this so well as a level concept, but much like the underwater sections, I can understand that people can only take so much of running at the screen and not knowing where they're going. However, I really think Warped has the best incarnation of this level type. Placing the player in the Jurassic era really keeps immersion intact, and breaking up the dinosaur chase sections with platforming sections really serves to make the level type that much more enjoyable. It's a happy medium for players on both sides of the fence, whether they like the chase sections or hate them. Personally, I'm a fan. There are 3 levels with this theme: Boneyard, Dynamite, and Oedipus Rex, which is a secret level that can be accessed via being carried away by a pterodactyl. Last but not least, we have the level type that Crash Bandicoot Warped is most notorious for: vehicle levels. Now, there's a good amount of debate on what constitutes a vehicle in this game, but the following levels all go on my list. Let's start with the tiger riding sections. In Crash 3, Coco's first playable level is Orient Express. This sees Coco riding on the back of a tiger named Purah on the Great Wall of China. You have to dodge Eastern-style dragons, Cortex's goons, and barrels being thrown at you. For me, this harkens back to the Crash Bandicoot 1 level, Hog Wild, but sees you also avoiding obstacles to get to the end of the level. The reason this level type is one of my favorites is because of the simple principles it's built upon. A normal run of these levels may be a tad bit challenging, but easily doable. In contrast, a run where you collect everything necessitates intentional inputs and split-second decisions to ensure that you don't miss anything on the path. Midnight Run expands upon this even more so, with you needing to keep in mind whether you need to be on the upper or lower levels to get the collectibles. Continuing on our Coco tangent, there's another level type that's attributed to her: the jet ski levels. I recall these ones being some of my older sister's favorite levels when we were kids, and I can't blame her. Stunning environments with realistic water effects, at least for the time, are bound to catch anyone's eye. I also recall that she enjoys racing games, so this kinda checks out. Ride on ramps and get to the end of a hallway-like course to earn the crystal while avoiding enemies and cannonballs. Levels in this locale include Making Waves, Tell No Tales, Ski Craze, and Hot Cocoa. That last one can be accessed by running over the alien sign in level 14, Road Crash. Speaking of Road Crash, that brings us to the motorcycle levels. These have always been a divisive topic among the fan base. On the plus side, I think the overall speed of the bike and the design of the level work well enough. Windy roads that remind me of something straight out of a Roadrunner cartoon are really satisfying to look at. The problem with these is the handling. The bike is just so stiff. Why give us all these curvy roads if we move in straight angles across them? It's just weird. And for some reason, rear-ending the rival cars gives them a speed boost, which can serve to make the levels even more frustrating. As with the other level themes, the motorcycle sections get harder and harder as you progress through the game, cultivating in the level Area 51, which has all the difficulties listed above, but in the dark. Suddenly, Bug Light seems like a walk in the park. These aren't my favorite, but I would say they're a fun experience overall, despite their flaws. The level list for this set is a little lengthy in my opinion. Like, I know they designed a new engine specifically for the motorcycle levels, but 4 is just going a little overboard. We got Hog Ride, Road Crash, Orange Asphalt, and Area 51. To round out our list of vehicles, we have the airplane levels. There's 3 in total. The first one, Bye Bye Blimp, sees you play as Coco, who uses her plane to take down Cortex's blimps. Mad Bomber sees you playing as Crash this time and getting in dogfights with enemy planes. Lastly is Rings of Power, where you're again playing as Crash and racing through a set of rings to the finish. The first 2 levels in this niche are well suited to the controls of the plane. I think they serve themselves well to semi-open areas with a spread out main objective. However, when you get to racing, Rings of Power feels awfully similar to the controls of the motorcycle. Tight turns simply weren't the specialty of these vehicles, which in some ways serves to hurt some of the overall level designs. With all this in mind, Crash Bandicoot Warped easily has the best lineup of levels in the Crash Bandicoot series as a whole, with more hits than misses, and even the misses it does contain are more than playable. Like I said in the intro section, the devs really took the core of what Crash Bandicoot was about and turned it up to 11. This extends not only to the level design, but to Crash's moveset as well. Coming off the back of Crash 2, which was critically acclaimed for its addition of the slide and body slam moves, Crash 3 expands upon this even further by allowing Crash to unlock power-ups after defeating each boss. This is a first for the series, so let's take a look. The first power-up we're treated to is after defeating Tiny Tiger in the Coliseum, and it's a souped-up version of the body slam? Okay, look, I know people always hate on Wrath of Cortex for its useless sneak power-up, but come on. The only thing that the super body slam is useful for is opening metal boxes, which is something that Crash's regular body slam did in Crash 2. It really doesn't make any sense. I think this is one of the lazier additions to the game. Now that I think of it, people give Wrath of Cortex a lot of crap for things that Warp got away with scot-free. Anyway, this power-up is pretty lackluster, but I suppose it's still a fitting reward for a first boss. It also has a little area of effect, but I find that it has a really niche use case that becomes borderline inconsequential once you obtain the rest of the power-ups. After doming Dingo Dial, we're treated to debatably one of the best power-ups in the game, the double jump. This lets the player get even more height than the slide jump, and it's really handy as a failsafe to be more risky when clearing gaps. Every good platformer out there needs either a glide or a double jump, that's just facts. The double jump can also be used in tandem with our next power-up. Upon taking down the inventor of the Time Twister, Nefarious Tropy, we're granted the ability of the Tornado Spin. This is a super spin that, when used in tandem with a jump or double jump, allows you to preserve elevation and travel across otherwise unclearable gaps. You're also invincible to certain attacks whilst in the spinning animation, which makes it great for safe approaches in areas that are dense with opposition. After Engine gets blown to bits by Coco's spaceship, he leaves behind the Fruit Bazooka power-up. This one feels the most logical, as it almost makes sense that the remnants of his ship would contain a bazooka. You can use this to obviously hit things from afar, but I found that much like the Super Body Slam, there isn't a whole lot of use for the bazooka. I would say at least 95% of the time, you could use a combination of your other power-ups to obtain out-of-reach collectibles, as opposed to sitting stationary while you pull the bazooka out. I also think any power-up that kills inertia in a 3D platformer, or any platformer for that matter, belongs in the garbage. The bazooka in this game is akin to forcing Mario to stand still while shooting fireballs. I could definitely do without this one. Speaking of inertia, after we smack Cortex in his bald-ass head, he leaves behind the speed shoes. This gives Crash the ability to sprint, which is crucial for the time trials. I've mostly omitted talking about the time trials in my Crash Bandicoot series thus far because this is the game that introduced them. So despite the fact that they appear in all the games in the N-Sane trilogy, I'm only going to be talking about them in this one because my opinion on time trials in Crash 1 and 2 has always been the same. The levels in those first few games were not built with the time trials in mind. I appreciate the extra challenge they add to those games, and I did complete them all to receive my platinum trophies on PlayStation, but dear lord, they simply don't belong there. However, for Crash 3, they definitely do. Let's get into it.
If you have already retrieved a levels crystal, then you will find a floating clock when you enter for the second time. This floating clock activates time trial mode. Grab it, and the clock will start ticking. Race for the end to get the best time, but beware, some elements will change.
So, the relics are a new collectible added to Crash Bandicoot 3, and they come in 3 varieties: Sapphire, Gold, and Platinum. You obtain these by re-entering a level you've already completed, picking up the clock and getting to the end of the level as fast as you possibly can. Depending on how your time compares to the set times, you're awarded one of 3 relics. From lowest to highest, it goes Sapphire, which can be completed with minimal effort or tricks; Gold, which requires solid effort and a few tricks; and Platinum, which typically requires you to pull out everything in Crash's arsenal to achieve the time. Unlike the padding and side quests of the modern era of gaming, the relics feel like a refreshing extra challenge that naturally extends the game's runtime and grants it amazing replayability. Rewarding your player with extra levels is a fantastic way to ensure they're getting the most value for their dollar. Alright guys, that's all I have for you, so... What? Oh.
Boss Rush.
Welcome back to Boss Rush, where I thank you for subscribing and hitting that like button. And you turn notifications on? You dapper dog. Well, let's get going. First off, we have Tiny Tiger, and I guess he gave up on the breakfast cereal thing because he's settling for my sausage. Read between the lines and don't get hit by his triple penetrator, and Tiny is as good as trounced. Next up to bat, we have Dingo Dial, and I guess he didn't realize healing crystals are out, and... are in. Dodge the heat, beat his meat, and enjoy a frosty treat with your new penguin pal. Third is Entropy, and this man is writing like he's running out of time. Do some platforming, turn his vibrator settings up to 11, and smack that man in the mouth until it's quiet uptown. Don't throw away your shot. Second to last, we have the man Engine, and last time I spared him a good roasting. Unfortunately, I won't be so forgiving this time around. This dude had the audacity to recycle his Voltron armor from Crash 2. Unfortunately for him, the Megazord slaps way harder than Voltron. Blow this two-faced toaster to bits until he can't believe it's not butter. Lastly, we got Johnny and Plank from Ed, Edd and Eddy, and we just gotta remind him why he's the community outcast. Dodge all the nonsense he's throwing your way, and when you find an opening, dunk him like it's NBA 2K. This once again concludes this episode of
Boss Rush.
Now back to the show. Well, you guys, this brings us to the end of my first series of videos I've covered on the Nostalgia Nate channel. Crash Bandicoot Warp is such a crazy fun time, as is the whole trilogy. I've ended these videos all kinds of ways before, some critical and some analytical and others more heartfelt. I think this one falls into the latter category. I love this game for all the memories it holds for me. Memories of a simpler time where bills and stress and stability were all just problems for a future me. Now that future me is here, I guess you could say I wish I had a time twister of my own. A way to go back to those moments, and I think for me, and by extension for you, Nostalgia Nate can be that place. So please, if you made it this far, consider dropping a like on this video and subscribing. In the comments, tell me about your favorite memory with this game or suggest a new game that you'd like for me to talk about. If you didn't like this video but still watched it to the end anyway, let me know what I can improve on in the comments below. I also have a Discord community and stream on Twitch from time to time. We're doing a Nostalgia Nate 2-year anniversary there and also a charity stream in late October, so I would love to have you there for that. Stay tuned for a special thanks to a very special person who did a very cool thing for me at FanX in Salt Lake City. And stick around past the special thanks to get a little teaser for what's coming up next for the replaying series. I've been Nostalgia Nate, and I hope you give yourself some much needed love today.